Students who have dated their teachers, what's your story? Before we start, welcome back to Reddit Stories Hub. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Here, we'll be telling you interesting, thought-provoking stories from Reddit. So, get comfortable and let's jump right in. Story 1. I dated a law professor during the summer break after my first year. She was the spitting image of Lilith Sternin from Cheers, in looks, dress, and mannerisms. She had 20 years on me, and was not someone I would have considered attractive at that stage of my life. It would be safe to say she was not well liked by most students. She had just gone through a very brutal and very public divorce. As I was walking out of class, she was standing at the lectern with a 1,000-yard stare and looking utterly dejected. I talked her into hitting the bar with some other students and a couple of professors. She got loose, I got loose, and we spent the next 3 months tooling around and shagging like bunnies. I blew off a summer internship to go screw around, which is probably why I ended up being a career public attorney, or not. Looking back, it was one of the happiest and most satisfying parts of my life. We broke it off amicably and remained friends right up until the time she succumbed to terminal illness a few years ago. Story 2. I had a brief sexual relationship with a college professor while I was taking a course she taught. I was studying an engineering discipline in college and getting a minor in literature, and she taught one of the literature courses on offer at our university. Junior year, I was 20 years old at the time. I was in her course, and the first few weeks nothing notable happened. The week after we submitted our first essay, she tapped me on the arm as I was leaving the class and asked me to stop by her office hours to discuss the essay I'd submitted. I dropped by her office later that day and she basically told me, "This is one of the best essays I've ever read." I'd heard from a colleague who also teaches literature courses which I had taken the previous year. "You were a strong writer, but this was great. Have you considered doing anything with writing?" We talked for a while about my aspirations related to writing, and then we talked about writing in general, and some of the things we liked about books unrelated to the curriculum we had both read. Since I was in engineering, I actually didn't have many people to discuss literature with, so I stopped by her office a few more times over the next couple of weeks to just shoot the shit with her. I'm not going to lie, she was not a bad-looking lady, but I hadn't really been thinking about her that way. She was in her early 40s, which is much older than I normally go for. Until one day we were in her office well past the end of her office hours, and she told me she had to go home to feed her dog, and asked if I'd like to join her. That was forward enough that I got the hint and accepted her offer. You can fill in the blanks about what happened from there. For the rest of the semester, I'd go over to her house once or twice a week a little way off of campus, and we'd drink wine, talk about books, politics, ethics, all that high-strung cerebral shit that you pay attention to when you are deep in the world of academia, and then we'd bang for a while. After the semester ended, I went off to work an internship, and when I came back the next year, I stopped by her office to talk every now and then, but never re-engaged romantically with her. We had a lot in common, a different time and different circumstances, and I think we might have had a future, but not that way. I had a life to build, she was already living hers. The one thing that I never really considered at the time was the idea that our relationship might be improper. I was going to ace the course anyway. It wasn't an upper-level course or anything with a really high bar for composition, just a few solid papers and good attendance was enough to net you an A, but I could see how we might have needed to be a little cloak and dagger about the whole thing. Story 3. Had an emotional affair all through senior year of prep/boarding school with my beautiful English teacher. She was 9 years older, petite, delicate, long straight black hair, pale translucent skin. She was lonely and felt vulnerable at the mostly male school. I was obsessed with her, and it turned out the feeling was mutual, but we kept the physical dimension at bay until graduation night, when she pulled me out of a party and into the darkness outside, and said she couldn't stop wondering what it would be like to kiss me. Off we went. I cannot tell you how explosive it was to finally go at it with an ideal figure you have been fantasizing about forever, but mostly experienced in a professional/distant capacity. When the clothes came off, it was just transcendent. We dated for 2 years. She would drive up to see me in college on the weekends, and we would check into a $14 motel room and spend hours just undressing each other. Unbelievable sex. And at that age I was in unlimited/insatiable mode all the time. It wound down because she was very wrapped up in an obscure academic career and the lives and fates of fringe 18th century poets, and pretty much expected me to share her sensibilities, and it turned out she had a younger sister with Downs who would require lifetime care, and she was quietly making plans for her and me, as a team, to shoulder the burden. I was 19. We parted as friends, more or less, but did not stay in touch. I know she went on to be a lit professor at a prestigious university, married another academic, and had a couple of very highfalutin books published. Student-teacher sex is always characterized these days as damaging and borderline assault, abusive to the student, etc. But I can tell you this relationship was one of the best things that ever happened to me, in bed or out. I was unbelievably lucky. Story 4. When I was a sophomore in high school, I started hooking up with my early 20s substitute teacher. It was a weird time in my life, and at that point a huge fantasy of mine, as it might be for other teenage boys. It started in my algebra class. I was the resident class clown, and talked a shitload for no reason other than interrupting the flow of class. She was really hot, and my friends and I were discussing her features when I decided it was a good idea to strike up a conversation with her. This was mostly to impress my friends, and I didn't consider that she would react to my hitting on her. I think I asked her if she wanted to get a burrito for lunch one day, and she responded with, "Talk to me after class." My friends thought I was in deep shit, but the way she looked me in the eye and engaged seemed out of the ordinary. Fast forward a couple weeks. She is still subbing my class, and we have hung out a couple of times, hikes and food and the like. Frankly, I was astounded by this turn of events, and was in somewhat of a confused stupor. I didn't really pick up on her advances until my birthday, when she invited me to her house and gave me an eighth of purple and a vibrating D-ring. She said we should use it sometime. I was freaking out inside but trying to act like Cary Grant or something. She informed that her biggest fantasy was to have a student go down on her while she wore her teaching clothes. I obliged in a very clumsy manner, to say the least. I stupidly broke up with my girlfriend of a year and began to invest time into this odd situation. She was a Diablo Cody sort of character. She was a stripper on the side and had several sugar daddies that would take her on vacation, but she would not allow them to touch her. I would see her downtown with these dudes and have to pretend like I didn't know her. She introduced me to Arrested Development, Mr. Show, and other comedic stuff that shaped my interests nowadays. She wanted to write about her experiences, and I agreed that it would make a good story, like I'm doing now, I guess. Oh, she also had a sex swing. My mom caught wind of this and eventually got her teaching credentials stripped. She didn't get in any legal trouble, but definitely stopped talking to me. I'm friends with her on Facebook, and I think she does improv in New York City, and not much else. I've never written about this and kind of forgot about it, to be real. I was stoked at the time, but looking back it was pretty inappropriate. Story 5. Not so much dated, but she was my 8th grade English teacher. She and her husband had a house on the lake where I lived. Her husband worked all week and would only come down on the weekend. My friend and I saw her one day while skiing. She asked us to stop by later that evening. She had beer. She was in her early 30s. That night we just talked about the previous school year, and my friend and I got drunk and passed out on her couch. She asked us back that evening. We grabbed a beer, and she whispered to me, "Don't drink too much tonight." When my friend passed out on the couch, she asked if I wanted to go to the bedroom with her. Of course I did. We did it 3 or 4 times a week for the next 2 months. A couple of times twice a day. After the summer was over, I went to high school, a different school, in 9th grade, and never saw her again. The next summer we went by her lake house, and someone else answered the door. She had sold it. Story 6. I dated my high school English professor. There was a 15-year difference. It was after I graduated. Before I graduated, we had some sort of relationship. We never talked about inappropriate things, but I suppose the fact that we spoke at all would be considered inappropriate. The fact is, I struggled with depression my sophomore year, and he was the only one to recognize it and ask me if I was okay. He was honestly my best friend for several years, and we chatted constantly. A couple of weeks after I graduated, we took a trip a couple of hours away. I think I kinda thought there would be flirting involved, but I never thought it would turn out the way it did. We actually had a really great day, going to parks and comic stores and dinner. After dinner, we got ice cream and sat down. He rubbed my shoulders and kissed my head, and I remember him saying, "I think we both know how this is going to end up if we hang out more." He left for a trip to London a couple of days afterward. When he came back, we saw each other again and started sleeping together. He would drive up to my college apartment almost every weekend to spend time with me. Eventually, things fell apart after about a year. I needed more, and we both knew this was only temporary, despite us both expressing more than sexual feelings for one another. Things soured once my new boyfriend, now an ex, couldn't deal with us still talking, because we were still best friends, and threatened him without me knowing. We didn't talk for a couple of years. My husband now knows and doesn't particularly care about me speaking with him, but now he's also about to get married and I guess his fiancée would have a problem. I guess that's understandable. We saw each other this weekend. We were at the same concert. We briefly made eye contact and waved. It made me feel really sad. Although I am completely and 100% in love with and dedicated to my husband, I still mourn losing a friend who got me through so much. Although the dating was really fun, I knew it would end. Back then, I just never thought that our friendship would cease. Story 7. I was a senior in high school, and he was a substitute teacher in his early 20s. It started with some very mild flirting. Our faces would light up when we saw each other. I was so wrapped up in the idea of him. He wrote in my yearbook a message that really made me realize it wasn't all in my head. We happened to crash the same party a random weekend. He was hammered, but it was honestly so much fun dancing with him and feeling like it might just happen. Somehow his buddies got wind that I was in high school and literally dragged him away and drove him home. I totally get why they did that. They probably saved his career that night, because I know what would have happened and us dancing could have gotten him fired. It was dirty dancing. He never came back to sub until I graduated. I ran into him years later, and I could still see the struggle in his eyes. Sincere smile, but worried because we are from a small town. I wish it would have happened. Story 8. I dated my economics teacher my senior year of high school. I had him my junior year as well, and we always had a thing for each other. If he would hear me say I was cold during class, he'd throw me his jacket and let me keep it the whole day, and I'd drop it off after class. He'd make food and bring me some. He knew I loved sweets, so he'd make cupcakes and cookies and treats of things he thinks I would like and sneak them to me after class. I became his TA junior year because I needed hours, and it just kind of unraveled from there. By senior year, everyone knew what was going on, but we were all about to graduate, so no one gave a shit. The principal had some suspicions, and he absolutely hated my teacher with a passion, and the feeling was definitely mutual, and had him move to the classroom next to his office so he could keep an eye on him throughout the year. The principal was the definition of AD honestly, and did end up getting fired the year after I left. I ended up having my econ class as my last class of the day, so I would stay after class until the principal would leave, and then we'd leave together. He ended up finding out about us the week before I graduated, but he couldn't do anything because the teacher and I were both leaving the school. He got a job offer elsewhere, and of course, I was graduating. We never continued anything after I graduated since I was moving away and he was on to bigger and better things, but it was a fun little fling. He was getting out a very nasty divorce and I was his distraction, and it kept me out of high school drama with immature guys, which I definitely do not regret. And for those of you wondering, yes, he did curve my grades for me. I am awful at economics, and he helped me pass his class to keep my GPA and graduate. No regrets, honestly. Story 9. I married my college professor. We've been together almost 20 years. I was over 21 and he was not yet 30. It was an independent study type course my last semester. I had to hint to him that I was interested. We went on a date and the rest is history. Not a scandal or big deal. Story 10. I dated my college professor in my last few weeks of the final semester. She was extremely timid and shy, yet strangely attractive. I decided to ask her out after class one day to see what she would say. She told me it's an inappropriate thing to ask a teacher in school, and that she would see me next week. She emailed me later that evening from her personal email saying that she couldn't answer me properly at the time, but that she was down to go on a date. We went on a few dates, dinner, drinks, etc. However, it did not last long as we were too incompatible on a personal level, opposite ends of the personality spectrum, I guess. I broke it off after 6 to 7 weeks, and she didn't take it well. Luckily for me, I never saw her again or had to have a piece of work graded by her. Although the way it ended did stop me from returning to the school to give a presentation about my dissertation to one of the classes, definitely did not want to risk that extremely awkward situation. Story 11. I turned 18 my senior year. My German teacher and I were always flirty before that though. He was married my junior year but divorced by my senior year. I slept with him 3 times, found out I had chlamydia, confronted him about it, he frigging knew about it. I got mine all cleared up and now he's married to some chick, probably still with chlamydia, and teaching English over in Dubai. Story 12. I dated a TA when I was in college. It really wasn't too big a deal. She didn't grade the final paper, and most of the tests/quizzes were multiple choice/fill in the blank, so there wasn't really any way for her to show me preferential treatment. Just sat and listened to her read through the prof's PowerPoint slides and answer questions. We didn't tell the prof or anyone in the class, but we weren't exactly secretive either. I doubt anyone would have cared. It didn't really have a hot-for-teacher vibe, but the first few weeks were kind of fun, stealing glances and such. Story 13. I had a huge crush on my high school gym teacher. Few years after graduation, Facebook came out and I looked him up. Still super hot. We met up for drinks, then a week later he invited me to his place for dinner. It was a one-time thing, it was awesome, although now almost 10 years later he'll still text me thirsty as hell. No regrets. Story 14. I dated my high school history teacher year after graduating high school. We're still together 5 years later. It was awkward with my high school friends once we came out. He is the best man I've ever met, and I'll definitely be with him forever. He's 10 years older than me, so we still have lots in common. I'd say the worst part is that going back to our hometown, still so many dirty looks. Wish they could just be happy for us. Story 15. My story is a little bit different from the ones I've read here. I entered one of Brazil's most prestigious law schools when I was 18. On my first party, fresh out of high school, I met this beautiful girl who was 23 and on her last semester. We hooked up a few times but nothing too much. A couple of weeks later I drunkenly hooked up with a classmate and ended up dating her for 4 years. Fast forward to my final year and who is the professor? The same girl I had hooked up with when I got into uni. She had graduated, gotten her LLM and was finishing up her PhD thesis. A couple of weeks after classes had restarted, I broke up with my girlfriend and went on a night out with my high school friends, so no one from uni was there with me. It was carnival, so 5 days of parties. We hooked up again, and again, and again. We ended up kissing only each other during carnival. Just to specify why this point is so important, all my friends kissed like 20 to 30 girls each. 1 week later I had classes with her. It was awesome. Everyone joked us because of our previous relationship, not having any idea that we were seeing each other again. That was in 2009. 8 years later, we're still stupidly in love with each other, with 2 boys, 3 in 1, and a girl on the way. I graduated with honors, got a master's degree and am now studying to get my PhD. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.